Welcome back. We haven't lost anybody. That's a good sign. Okay. So, I thought maybe since we spoke about the mind this morning, we'll just do a, meditation on the clarity of the mind. Um, so maybe I'll say a couple of words. It can be a difficult. So meditations, you can have many objects. In Buddhism, there's no such thing. So sometimes when you go to, I don't know, other meditation, other places where they, do meditation, sometimes they might say, clear your mind of thoughts, or just be a blank space, right? So in Buddhist practice, that's not meditation. There is no such thing as a mind that's clear of thoughts. The best one can do, at least in our current state, there is a point where you can be in such a meditative equipoise that your mind just doesn't have any thoughts. That is possible, but that's not where we are at the moment. So the best we can do is we can focus on one object. So meditation in Buddhist practice always has an object of meditation. So the object can be a breath. It's always a mental object. It's a mental image, right? So it's not like you're looking at a flower and staring at it and meditating on it. That's not meditation either. Meditation has to be in the mind, right? If you're looking at a flower, that's using your eye perception. Eye perception, eye consciousness, they say. So you have to use your mental consciousness. So you can memorize the picture of the flower, image of the flower, and you can then close your eyes and have, generate that flower in your mind, and you can focus on that. That's meditation, right? Or, so you can use images, you can use sounds, like, sometimes when they ring the gong and then the sound goes away, but you still have the sound in your mind, right? So you can focus on that. That's meditation again, right? So anyway, so you can have different objects of meditation. So we always have an object. And so when we use the mind as the object, sometimes it's hard to find it. So the best way to find it is, so we're not going to concentrate on the thoughts. We're going to concentrate on what's the thing that's having thoughts. So it's that meta awareness, sometimes they call it, right? So we'll give it a shot. We won't do it for very long, maybe 5 minutes. But maybe we'll get a sense of the clarity of the mind. Sometimes one is able to get to a place where you can see the thoughts arising and falling. So we'll give it a shot, see if it works. Yeah, okay. So let's take our seating position. Again, the most important one is just to have our backs in a relaxed, straight but relaxed, the natural curvature. Everything else to some degree is secondary. So first, to kind of bring our mind to rest, you can use the breath as the object of meditation, like we did this morning. So this is just to get our kind of calm the mind. Or we can start on the actual clarity of the mind meditation. Just try to focus on the breath, and as your mind strays, which it almost certainly will, you just bring it back to the breath. And if there's distractions like sounds and so on, you just, just you can be aware of them, but you don't have to follow them. You can just have the breath be as our focus. And once we have achieved some level of quietude, quiescence maybe, we can, to find the mind, the object that is the mind itself, to help it sometimes, to find it, it helps to ask questions. Like, for example, what is, where is the mind? So is it in the body? Is it in the brain? Inside our head? Outside our head? Or, for example, does it have a color? So you focus on the thing that can think, and you don't, get an answer and then follow that answer. You just ask the question and see what arises. Does it have a color? Does it have a shape? Round, square, and so on. And we ask the question, where is it? So maybe you answered that, no, it's not in our head. And it's not inside our body. It seems to appear it's both inside and outside the body. So then you can ask, where does it stop? Like, is the mind like 2 feet away from our body? Like stops at the 2 feet radius from our body? Or at the walls of this room? So like that, at some point, hopefully, there will be a sense of just plain awareness. That thoughts arise, maybe perceptions of sound. And you don't follow the thoughts, you just let them be. You don't necessarily want to shut them down, you just kind of let them be. You just don't follow them. And if you go far enough, if you're able to go deep enough, once you're able to just notice the thoughts go by, or you're able to feel they're arising, you notice this quietness. That's the clarity and the bare awareness, if you will. And that's the mind that we all have. We're just not aware of it. Because in our daily lives, all we're aware of are the waves on the top of the ocean. But the waves at the top of the ocean actually isn't the natural state of the mind. That's actually unnatural. And deep down, it's quiet, it's calm. It has the qualities of compassion and love and vastness of aspiration. Okay. So you can arise when you're ready. So I don't know, in the beginning, it's hard to, I'm going to give you a taste of the kind of meditation one does to come to, that realization of how the mind is, right? Because we just don't know, right? Unless we do these types of analysis, we just don't know that this is what the Buddha was talking about, right? It's not apparent to us how things really are, what our mind's true nature really is. And it's not how it appears to us at all. And in fact, what's counterintuitive is that the natural state of the mind isn't what appears to us, how the mind appears to us right now, right? That's unnatural. That's because we have all these waves that have been stirred up. But our natural state actually is that purity. I mean, you can call it whatever you wish. You can call it purity. You can call it the Buddha nature. You can call it, different lineages call it different things. But that's what the mind is. Now remember, the mind is not the same. We're not talking about the mind here. Buddhism doesn't have a concept of the soul, right? There is no such thing, again, in Buddhism as the soul. The mind is not the soul. Again, a soul has to be, by definition, permanent. it has to be unitary. It has to be partless, right? You can't divide up a soul into multiple souls. It has to be independent, right? It can't depend on anything else, right? And because of cause and effect, like I mentioned, there can't be anything that's permanent, just like there can't be a God, because everything has to be a product of a cause or produce something else. A soul can't produce anything else, and it can't be a product of something, right? So there is no concept of a soul. What we have is basically the mind, which is not permanent either, because it's changing constantly. And it's a continuum, right? It's just various moments of consciousness that just goes from one to the next. Doesn't have a beginning, doesn't have an end. Well, no, it doesn't have an end either, right? Doesn't have a beginning, doesn't have an end. But that doesn't mean it's permanent. Permanence here means it's unchanging, not that it doesn't have a beginning and doesn't have an end. That's not the kind of permanence we're talking about. So by that definition, there is no such thing in the universe that's permanent. Well, on the debate grounds in monasteries, there's debate about this. There are a couple of things one could argue. It could be considered permanent, like enlightenment, but these are these are edge cases, right? They're like exceptions, but in general, which other than the few things that you can count on your one hand, there is no such thing as permanent, that's unchanging. Excuse me, because everything has to be a product of a cause or is a cause for some other effect. And permanent things can't be a cause and can't be an effect. So Buddhism does, so the mind is, again, not permanent, but it's still beginningless and endless. So that's all we've got, right? That's really what we are. Is this, yeah. Anyway, so that's the kind of the meditation. I just want to give you a flavor of the kind of meditation one does to come into touch, get to an understanding of when we talk about these concepts of the mind and karma and various things, these are the kind of analysis or in meditation what one does, right? So yeah, okay. So let's see, I can share my screen again and we can continue on. So we talked about, share. We were talking about the teacher and we finished that. Did anybody have any questions that came up during, like when you were thinking at lunchtime or?
Thinking about soul and mind. Exactly different.
Okay, so here, sorry. Well, I got to turn this on. Okay.
I just got an idea inside while meditating. Like soul and mind, are they different entities or they are all in one space?
Oh, you're going to have to put it, because we're close to each other. One of them is feeding that. Thank you. Yeah. So as I said, well, you're asking the question, are soul and the mind the same? What I'm trying to say is Buddhism doesn't have a soul, right? So your concept of what you're saying, soul, is coming from other understanding that you have from whatever tradition you were brought up in or whatever you follow, right? So I don't know what that concept means for you, right? Different people have different understanding of what soul is. But from the understanding that Hinduism had, which is what Buddhism was countering, if you will, right? A soul is something that is, unique to each person and is going to go on forever, has been forever, is always there, and it's never changing, right? There is no change to a soul, right? And And then when you die or whatever, depends on what tradition you follow, you go back to the soul, you become one with the soul, whatever your, the vast consciousness, the universal, many different, different branches of Hinduism say different things. So what Buddhism is saying is it just can't be. If you believe what your eyes tell you, what our senses tell us, what our intellect tells us, everything is a cause and effect. There can't be anything else. So unless somebody can point to, comes along and says, okay, there's the soul, there can't be one. It's just a matter from Buddhist perspective, it's a matter of deduction, if you will, or induction. No, deduction. Yes, deduction. So the question, so for them, it doesn't exist. It's just not something that you even ask about because it can't exist.
It's something I have to digest.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's true. Yeah. Anyway, so once we have so this is, and then the basic thing that, we start with, so this is like the stages, if you will, right? So we kind of like the teacher is really just it's the foundation of everything. So the first stage is a very beginner. What the teachings tell us is to understand how precious our human birth is, right? And so that's why he's saying here, understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once is greatly meaningful and difficult to find again. Please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly day and night takes its essence. So what it's trying to do is give us a feeling that this is, this is a rare occurrence. The fact as a human is a very rare occurrence. And we can get a sense of this. Again, Buddhism is all about asking questions and looking at the natural world and seeing what the answers are, right? So for Buddhism, there is anyway. So then if you look around and forget about, Buddhism does talk about God realms and other realms that we can't, with our current set of senses, we can't fathom or we can't perceive, but at least we can see animals, right? So we're in, there's few acres of property around the center, right? Maybe a couple of acres. And we are half a dozen human beings here, right? But just within this acre or 2 acres are probably millions of insects, animals, birds, more probably. We just don't even know how many ants and how many whatever all there are, right? So just that is 6 out of a million, and that's within just in a couple of acres, right? Now, if you consider that even 6 billion human beings on this planet of, let's say, however many quadrillion, pentillion, I don't even know, of beings there are, right? We don't even know. It's a very tiny, 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 tiny fraction of them, right? So that's one way to get a sense of how rare it is. I mean, that's actually a very basic kind of, there are other ways of doing in meditation. One can ask these questions and try to find answers. There are many ways, then the scriptures teach us about how to do those meditations. What are the questions and answers questions to ask? But that's one way of thinking about it, right? I mean, there is no reason why we couldn't have been born an insect, right? I mean, right? Is it like Was it a given that we would be born as a human being? Right? Was it a luck of the draw? We just happened to be born as a human being? Well, Buddhists would say no, because we created a karmic causes to be born as a human being. It takes an incredible amount of virtue. So that's something to rejoice in, and we do continuously rejoice every day. We're told to rejoice every day, just our good fortune. Because it takes an incredible amount, because the human, as I was alluded to earlier, the human birth is the highest form of birth one can have. It's got all the right set of conditions. Like animals, for example, don't have a discerning mind. They have sentience, right? But they don't have a discerning mind. They can't ask questions about where we came from, right? Is the soul and the mind the same, right? They can't ask those, answer or ask the questions. We can, right? We also, are free for the kind of fear, etc. We have the space to ask these questions, right? But also, our lives have enough suffering that we are forced to ask these questions, right? So that's, so we have all the right conditions, the right kind of tools we need in our faculties, mental and physical faculties, to be able to make progress. So that's why the human birth is considered the highest form, higher than certainly the animals and other realms, but also the God realms, even though the God realms have much more pleasure and all their, everything taken care of, but they are still considered lower, because when you have so much, good conditions provided to you, you don't have any impetus to practice, right? There's no spiritual growth. You're just using your good karma. You're just using up your good karma, not creating any virtuous karma for future lives, right? So, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, my teacher, used to say that, when the first thing he taught us students, and I still do this, right, is because it's become second nature over the decades. But, he said the first thing one does, his advice was, when you get up in the morning, even before your eyes have opened and you can see the ceiling, right, you think, how amazing that I have another day. Right? As we'll get to in a minute, death could have happened overnight. There's no reason that we had to keep alive the next day, right? I mean, many people die over those eight hours that we were asleep, right? So we just had good fortune, or karma, if you will, to still be alive. And in this human form, right? So that's one. How fortunate I am, right? So be thankful for that, be grateful for that. And then the second thing is, whatever I do today to create that motivation, whatever I do today, may I only be of benefit to others, right? So we probably won't succeed in that, because we're human beings. We have mental afflictions. We're not at the place where we continually just, are practicing virtue. But, we can create the motivation. If we don't have the aspiration, we'll never do it, right? That's the first thing, right? I mean, every great result, or every great result was born at the tip of a wish, right? That's some, I don't know, some scripture I read once, right? Every great result, or I can't remember the right word now, but you get the point. It's only if we create the aspiration will we actually, create the cause for following through with it, right? So anyway, so this is the first step, is to understand how fortunate we are to have this human birth, to have the space, to have the mental, the faculties to be able to, we could have been born with issues with our faculty so that we can't concentrate, or we can't think clearly, or we have gaps in our memory, or there's so many kinds of things that brain. So we don't have any of those things, and we have the space, we have the material needs taken care of, so we don't have to worry about where the next meal is going to come from. All those things that allow us to practice, that you're able to make the time to be here, right? It's an amazing gift, right? You don't have to work on a Saturday or work 7 days a week like half the population of the world, at least half the population of the world does, right? So you have the space to be able to devote to these kinds of things. So it's a pretty amazing opportunity. And so what it's saying is that please bless me so that I always just take the essence out of the whatever time I have, right, of this life. And then it says, so I have this amazing opportunity, this life, but unfortunately, it's not forever, right? It's coming to an end. Like with cause and effect, right? Whenever a cause for something arises, let's say the cause for a seed arises to sprout into a seedling and a plant, right? At the same time, as the arisal happens, the degeneration of the plant to be in this world also starts happening at the same time, right? A cause always ends, right? So the minute we are born also is now created the cause for our death to happen one day. That's just how cause and effect is. Otherwise, a cause would be permanent, right? Otherwise, it would, so along with the cause arises, you look at the world and you see, anytime something arises, also creates a cause for its degeneration. And our life is no different, right? The day we were born is the day that it created the conditions for us to die. So that's the impermanence, that we're constantly changing. Our bodies are degenerating. Our minds are degenerating. And at some point, it will degenerate to a point where it's going to be no longer on this planet, right? Or at least in this form on this planet. And so what it's saying is this life is as impermanent as a water bubble. So, in the bathtub, you know what a water bubble is like, right? It arises and then it just pops. It's up for a while and then it just pops, right? And our life is like that. We just don't know when it's going to be at all, right? We know it's going to happen. So there's a meditation on death. There's 3 main points. Death is certain. So this is the kind of analytical meditation one does, is because, again, we know we're going to die, right? This is not a surprise to any of us. But when the doctor tells us you have 6 months to live, it is a shock. Why is that? Right? Because it's here, right? But it's not here. We know it, but only intellectually. We don't think it. We don't live our life like that, right? We think we're going to live forever. We make plans for next year, next decade, when I'm 90 years old. But, there's no reason why I should be able, I'm 58, 57. There's no reason I'm going to be 58 or 59 for that matter, right? I mean, think about how many children die before they're even 5 years old, or children who die at adulthood before their parents die. There's no reason why I should live to a ripe old age, right? So there is no such thing as an untimely death. They say, oh, so-and-so had an untimely death. Every death is timely. It just so happens that their karma ran out. Or not karma ran out. Yeah, their karma that they created to be born in this life had been created and came to fruition. And their karma for how long that life would last also came to fruition, right? So, so death is certain. That's the 3 main, the meditation. You think, like, do I know anybody who has escaped death? Right? Every, king has to escape, he's still going to die. The Buddha had to die. right? All enlightened beings go away, like my teacher recently. So when the cause for them to be on this planet goes away, they're gone, right? So death is certain. The time of death is uncertain. I don't know when I'm going to die. At each moment, my lifespan on this planet is decreasing, right? Right now, it's 1 second less than it was a second ago when I was speaking to you. And so anyway, I'm not going into the there's three sub items in each, but anyway, so death is certain, time of death is uncertain. And then finally, at the time of death, our body won't help us, right? In fact, it will fail us, right? Our friends can't help us, our family can't help us, right? They can't stop us from dying. Our wealth, all our possessions, all we spent so much effort in gathering will be gone. All the treasured possessions that I have, my kids will come along and they'll give it to charity, right? They'll just throw it out. All the things that I really care about, right? They mean nothing to them, right? So our possessions aren't going to help us. The only thing, at the time of death, the only thing that will help us is the Dharma, is what we have done in this life to create positive mental state, right? If we have lived our life with kindness, with compassion, with generosity, etc., we will have created a karma, created the positive seeds for a positive next rebirth, to meet my teachers again, to continue on the spiritual path, to have a human birth again, to be born in a land where freedom of religion is available, is there, with the material possessions, with a body that is without any obvious limitations, and a mind without any obvious limitations, right? All those things that we take for as a guaranteed is not a guarantee at all. We had to create a lot of virtue to be able to have these conditions. So at the time of death, so that's what he said, after death, like a shadow follows the body. The shadow is always there, right? So death is like that. Shadow follows the body. And the results of black and white karma follow. So whatever virtuous karma or non-virtuous karma we created, karma is not like it's not like an omniscient being that's going to judge us, right? So in Buddhist thought, karma is just universal law. It's like gravity. The gravity doesn't care whether you're an apple or a bowling ball, right? Or a human being. You're going to fall. You go up, you send it up, it's going to come down, right? Karma is just like that. It doesn't care. It doesn't know. Karma is not a knowing thing. It's just what it is. That's what the Buddha was talking about, right? And so we deposit karmic seeds in our mind streams. If we deposit good karmic seeds, and by the way, doesn't matter whether you're Buddhist or not, just like a universal law, gravity works whether on the moon or the Mars or on Earth. Karma is true for whether you follow Buddhist thought or not, right? Everybody has the same things. I mean, the same seeds. And so, yeah. So, and the point of meditating on death is not because it's, people think it's depressing, or, Buddhism is just always talking about suffering and so on, right? And it can be depressing. But the point is that it creates a sense of urgency. That's the whole point in all of this, right? To understand that human birth is rare, and to understand that fortune will also come to an end, is to really internalize it so that we live like there might not be a tomorrow. Because if there isn't if we know that we're gonna, let's say the doctor comes and says you have 6 months to live, I strongly doubt that we will, like you all, I will, let small things become big deal, right? We have a different perspective, right? And we might have, we just don't know. We might have only 6 months to live, except that there's no doctor telling us that, right? But if we live like we only have 6 months to live every day, then we live with much, we see more joy. We see more pleasure in small things. We don't allow small annoyances to become the big things that we make them to be today, right? All the little insults and the little guy cutting us off on the road and all those things that we take so seriously, they just, like the water off our backs, like what they say, right? So that's the thing, we're more patient, we're more compassionate, we see the world differently, and that's what it's about, right? These meditations are not to depress us. And, all the religious traditions, not just Buddhism, right? They have some form of this. I mean, it's not like this is rocket science for Buddhism, right? I mean, all Christianity has this, Hinduism has some form of this, Judaism has this, I don't know about Islam all that well, so I can't speak for it. But, I mean, it's universal, right? But the point is that the meditations, at least in Buddhist practice, is how that we internalize and we gain what's called realizations, right? They become real to us. We act, we believe, they change us. They change our mental, the mind is not that different from our body, mind, like how if you have discipline and you make the effort and you go to the gym, your body's gonna get in shape. It's not like you have to tell the body to get in shape. It's automatic. If you make the effort and you go, it doesn't have a choice but to get in shape, right? Same with the mind. If we have the discipline and we make that effort, the mind will actually get in shape even if we don't want it to, seriously. Even if we say that I don't want my mind to get better, it will still get better. And I mean, I can attest to that. And many, you can talk to any Buddhist practitioner, and look, serious Buddhist practitioner who has made the effort, and they're different people than how they started out, right? It's not really rocket science. I mean, none of this really is earth-shattering rocket science. It's actually just teachings to help us to, different ways of attacking the problem, because many different people need different ways of doing things, right? Not one, just saying one thing is not going to solve it for everyone, right? So there are many different types of meditations for this very purpose. Different people need different techniques. Okay, so now cause and effect. So this is karma that we were talking about, right? So finding firm and definite conviction in this, which is, what we were talking about earlier, death and impermanence. Please bless me always to be careful to abandon even the slightest of negativities and accomplish all virtuous deeds, right? Because that's the only guarantee at death that I will continue to make progress is the karmic seeds I've created in this life. And there are ways to guarantee that you have a human birth the next time. It's not like it's a crapshoot. And the last moment before death, all the great teachers have said this. The biggest thing, I mean, there are many things, many karmic seeds that affect or that decide, if you will, what our next birth is going to be, right? But the biggest contribution is made by the condition or by the state of the last moment of our mind before death happens. If the last moment of our mind is virtuous, that is without fear, without anxiety, without attachment, I don't want to leave this world, I want to stay one more moment with my children or my family, whatever, attachment, right? If our mind is calm, without fear, in a state of, let's say, compassion or joy or whatever it is, acceptance, whatever you want to call it, that's more than half the battle to gaining a human birth next time. So all the teachers say that the greatest way to guarantee a next human birth is just the last moment of this life. But you see, because we have spent all our life in gathering things, in attachment to people, to rich, to wealth, etc., we haven't spent the effort on our mind. For the vast majority of us, and Lama Zopa Rinpoche used to talk about this, he visited, he used to visit all the time people on their last, deathbeds, right? Because they would call him and ask him to be there, do prayers and so on and so forth. Or people at airports. I remember there were few occasions of people at airports who were close to death who would ask him for advice. And he said, regardless of where I went, one thing was universal. He said, doesn't matter whether the person was black or white or brown or was rich or poor, whatever it was, right? He said, all of them, at the last moment, a fear, great fear arose. Because, you're looking at a void, right? You spend all your life in this pleasure palace, if you will, right? For the most part, most of us are, pleasure palace, we're compared to animals and other people on this planet. And then you're facing this unknown, vast unknown, and a great fear arises. And that's exactly what one doesn't want, right? If we want a good rebirth the next time around, we train in this life our minds so that at the time of death, it's calm, it's okay, right? And there are many people, like we had a center member 3 years ago, right? Israel, you probably don't know him, but Israel, what was his last name? I can't remember. And I was there, he was in Albuquerque at the hospital dying, and they were going to literally pull the plug on him, right? Because he wasn't going to live any longer. I mean, they could keep him alive, and he said, there's no reason, right? There's no reason to use up resources to keep me alive. Pull the plug. And they were supposed to pull the plug at 6 o'clock, right? So I was there doing prayers with him. And even at the last moment, he was absolutely calm. He was doing his prayers. He was, and when the oxygen finally ran out, there were a couple of gasps, right? The body doing the gasping for breath, right? But other than that, there was no struggle, no fear, no nothing. And he was a normal human being. It's not like he might have been enlightened. I don't know, right? I mean, I don't know. My perception is very clouded. But at least from what he seemed to, us, there were 2 or 3 of us there. It's just a friend, like a normal person, right? Like me, like you. But he had this amazing death. It was so inspiring, right? And I remember thinking that's how I want to go when that time comes, right? Of course, I could die in a car crash. There's no guarantee, right? I mean, it could be like that, right? But, if I have that luxury of just knowing that I'm going to go, then, that's how I'd like to go, Anyway. So, yeah, so he's saying, may I abandon even the slightest of negativities and accomplish all virtuous deeds so that I can continue to make spiritual progress. Because if we create negativities, we're just creating obstacles, right? It's like weeds and, like if, so the reason that they talk about the seed and how it, the potential, the seed has a potential to become a seedling and a plant, but it's not going to until you till the soil, which means you weed it, right? You get rid of the weeds, right? And the pebbles, right? And it's just like that, because if we're throwing more pebbles and weeds on the ground, the seed's not going to grow, right? That's how it is. Right? So yeah, it's natural, if you think about it like that, right? So that's why virtuous deeds bring positive results, Okay. So now he talks about renunciation, to have the courage to give up these worldly concerns, right? So he says, seeking samsara, means this cycle of life and continuous life, life and death, birth and death. So seeking samsaric pleasures is the door to all suffering. So samsaric pleasures, the worldly pleasures, right? They're uncertain and cannot be relied upon. Why? Because they're going to go, right? You get promoted, you get demoted. You become president, then they throw you out. They're not grateful at all, right? You become rich, stock market crashes, you back down to earth, right? So they're uncertain, cannot be relied upon. Recognizing these shortcomings, please bless me to generate the strong wish for bliss and liberation. So seeing that I have this life, it's not going to last, and knowing how karma works, then what you do is, renunciation, by the way, does not mean going and just, giving up this life and just going into the forest and just becoming becoming a monk or a nun, right? Renunciation has nothing to do with becoming monastic, right? What it has to, because you can be a monastic and totally be attached to this life, right? Becoming a monastic is it's just putting on robes, right? But if your mind, it's the outer, it's just like, I just look like this, right? But if I haven't changed my mind, then it doesn't mean anything, right? So renunciation really is about giving up the worldly concerns. So like, for example, what are worldly concerns, right? So for example, there are 8 worldly concerns, 4 and their opposite, right? So let me see if I can remember them. Wanting pleasure, not wanting pain. Wanting wealth, wanting wealth and not wanting gain and not wanting loss. That's how they put it, right? Pleasure, pain, gain, loss. Wanting a good reputation and not wanting people to speak lowly of you, right? And finally, wanting praise and not wanting blame. So we spend all our lives in one of those 8 things constantly. I mean, you can think about it. Praise, blame, pleasure, pain, gain, loss, reputation, and good reputation and not a bad whatever the opposite is. That's how we spend our life, right? And that's what worldly concerns means. So if we rise above those worldly concerns, if we no longer, our mental mind stream is no longer occupied by those considerations continuously. I mean, of course, we're human beings. It's okay to have them once in a while, or even most of the time. It's okay, but it would be good if just a few times everything that we do wasn't motivated by those 8 worldly concerns, right? By generosity, by kindness, just by altruism, right? So that's what he's talking about here. So that's what renunciation means, is having this disgust for this worldly life and giving up attachment, not looking outside, right? Knowing that outside isn't the answer. a new TV, a new car, new wife, these are not going to bring me kind of happiness that I'm looking for. They'll bring happiness for a while, but we're back to square one, right? So liberation here is basically the state of mind where we have freed ourselves from suffering, and we don't have to come, we don't have to take rebirth if we don't want to. Actually, in this particular case, once you reach liberation, you just don't want to come back, period. You're interested in personal liberation, right? To be free of suffering and just escaping all this. But, anyway. And then he says, once I have this renunciation, led by this pure thought, mindfulness, alertness, and great caution arise. The root of the teachings is keeping, the lay and monastic vows. Please bless me to accomplish this essential practice. So ethical discipline is the foundation of all Buddhist practice. If we don't have ethical discipline, and you can understand this, if we're always looking over our shoulder, I cheat the IRS, let's say, for the next 7 years, I'm always going to be worried. Are they going to catch me? Right? It doesn't create the conditions for a calm mind. Right? That those waves, you're just feeding those waves on the ocean, right? So if we want to make progress, ethical discipline has to be there. What does ethical discipline means? Specifically, it means, for example, there's many different kinds of vows, but the lay vows, the 5 main lay vows are, no killing, even mosquitoes for that matter. No killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, right? Sexual misconduct means splitting up couples or cheating, et cetera. So we know what that is, right? But, otherwise, 2 consenting adults, it doesn't matter, right? From a Buddhist perspective. So killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, no lying, and they say intoxicants, really means that you don't get drunk or get to the point. You can have, alcohol or whatever, but you don't get to a point where you lose your faculties, where you're going to commit something that's going to break one of those vows, right? You're going to steal, sexual misconduct, because your inhibitions are lowered, right? You start doing stuff that you wouldn't normally do. And that's why they talk about not, refrain from it. So things like that, right? So ethical discipline is the backbone, cornerstone. Without ethical discipline in Buddhist practice, no matter how much effort we make, if we don't have ethical discipline, we're just going to be spinning our wheels. And if we think about karma, we can see why, right? We're just creating more and more pebbles and weeds in the soil. And then it's just as I have fallen into the sea of birth and death and rebirth, so have all mother migratory beings. Bless me to see this, train in supreme bodhicitta, and bear the responsibility of freeing migratory beings. So this is very profound. So by the way, so the stages, you can see the stages now, right? You start with human life, the preciousness of this life, and that brings you some understanding, and of how, that you can't squander it, or this opportunity, like a goal, it's finding a piece of gold, right? And then seeing death, you realize, okay, I better make something of this, right? I can't, I got to spend my time well. And so that each of these feeds on the other, right? So this is how the path is laid out. Like Lama Tsongkhapa, this was his genius, really, is he laid this out in a way like you're making progress step by step by step. It doesn't mean that you have to become the expert at every one step before you can proceed to the next one. they all work with each other, right? And the more you study and practice this, you'll see each of them feeds with the other. So you work on all these things at the same time, but there is a graduated, set of steps, right? And they go from easier to harder. So great compassion is very hard, because you see what it's saying is, I have fallen into all this cycle of rebirth, and so have all mother migratory beings. That's what that's saying is, if I've had countless rebirths, if you accept that, let's assume let's assume that we get past our skepticism on that, and let's assume for the moment we accept that we've had countless rebirths. That means that we've had countless mothers, which means that everybody around us that we see has been a mother of us in some lifetime, right? So if we hold our mother in this life, the mother we know, with great value or great affection, let's say, right? Then is there any reason not to hold the other beings in the same way, right? They're not any different than our current mother. It just so happens we don't remember them, right? It's a big step. And it's said to be the most difficult one in Buddhist practice. But that's how the Bodhisattva, that's why the Buddha sees everyone, like I mentioned last time, the Buddha sees every being as perfect, or as every being with the same compassion and love as a mother her only child, right? And that's why, because they have perfected this understanding, right? They see every being as their mother, with the same love that they would have if they had taken birth in this planet as that, with a mother. So that's what we in meditation, actually not many of us, all of us who are on this path, there's this meditation, multiple meditation, 6-point cause and effect. There's the exchanging self with others, where we train our minds to see. I can't say my mind, I see every of you as, I have the same love and compassion for each one of you, and I see you as having been my mother. I have not gotten there, right? It's a hard step. It's a hard leap. But we do train in it, right? And these are the kind of trainings one does, because we want to generate that kind of compassion and love in our minds that we had if we had seen our dearest, if let's say that your mother doesn't work for you. For many of us, our relationship with our mother is a little complicated, shall we say. Fine, pick someone else that we have great love and compassion, a children or spouse, a dog, whatever happens to be, right? But that person has been that, our child, our dog, or whatever, countless times, right? So that's what he's saying here. Bless me to see this and train in supreme bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is this great compassion. Not just compassion, because we feel compassion for a dog that is dying, but this is great compassion, which is to see just the entire gamut of suffering that person might have been going through, birth after birth, and wanting to free that. We see beggars on the street and we have compassion for them, but we don't feel like we need to go and bring them out of beggarhood, right? But the bodhisattvas see us suffering, and they feel great compassion, and they take, as it says, and bear the responsibility of freeing each and every one of us, right? That's the difference in their vast capacity or vast aspiration. At least when they start, they only have the aspiration, they don't have the capacity. And the capacity that we have, right? And then he says, even if I develop only bodhicitta, that is the great idea of compassion, great compassion, without practicing the 3 types of morality, I will not achieve enlightenment. with my clear recognition of this, please bless me to practice the Bodhisattva vows with great energy. So the Bodhisattva vows are, the vows that these beings who have dedicated their lives to, lives to just benefiting others, right? So these are vows that they take. So there are many vows. And, if you have, taken, like Geshe Sherab or our teachers will give Bodhisattva vows, like sometimes to us, there are many vows. And, for example, one of the vows is if you see someone suffering, you are bound to help them, right? It's kind of like, what do you call it? The first responder. So when I used to live in California, I used to be a computer scientist in Silicon Valley. And, because of earthquakes, they basically said, I used to work for, at the time, small company, later it became very big, but, a few hundred people. And we had a couple of buildings, we were in a couple of buildings. And the training was that the ambulances, if there was a big earthquake, when the big one hit, you have to have at least 2 weeks worth of, because they couldn't guarantee that anybody will be able to get to you for 2 weeks, right? So there were, for each of these kinds of places, there were those of us who were emergency, I can't remember. Anyway, first we were trained, we had to take 80 to 100 hours of training and know how to do breech births and, all kinds of stuff, right? So I had training and all that, how to bandage like a bone sticking out of your arm and all this stuff, right? But one of the conditions of that was once you had that training and you were certified, and we had to do like every year, we had to go through like 2 weekends of continuous training, continuing ed. The thing was that if I was going down the highway and I saw that somebody needed help, was a car crash, and I didn't respond, I could be sued, right? I was responsible as a first, you were considered as a first responder, right? You were trained, you have to respond, even if you were on your way to point A to point B, right? There was, so like that, one of the Bodhisattva vows is if you see someone in distress, you have to help them. I can't say that I have kept that vow very purely, right? We have to be gentle with ourselves and know that, we can't, but that doesn't mean that we can't still take the vow, right? Because it has such great benefit, living in vows creates incredible virtuous, because you're taking an active role, you're saying, I am not going to do that. It's different from just saying, okay, I'm not going to kill versus, okay, I'm not killing right now because okay, let me put it this way. Why take vows, whether it's lay vows or monastic vows, any kind of vows, doesn't matter. The reason is the vow creates this, again, seed in our mind stream, right? It's all about the mental, Buddhism is all about the mind stream, right? What the condition of our mind is. And it creates this seed in our mind stream for continuing to create, or at least not create negative virtue. At least even if we don't create any positive virtue, at least don't create negative virtue. That would be a first step, right? That's one. Second thing is that, they say is, even when you are not, if you've taken a vow not to kill, let's say, even when you don't have the opportunity to kill, because you've taken the vow, you've taken an active, it's one of those things like saying, I'm going to specifically not ever going to do that versus, well, whenever, so normal, I'm not explaining myself. If I don't, no, there's no ant in front of me, right? So I can't kill anything anyway. So it's a neutral state of mind, right? But if I've taken the vow not to kill, regardless of whether there's an ant there or not, there is a positive state of mind created. That's the theory. That's what they tell me, right? So even when you're sleeping, you're actually creating positive merit. That's what Lama Zopa Rinpoche told us, right? Because you don't have the opportunity to kill or sexual misconduct or lie, steal, all these other things when you're stealing, when you're sleeping. But because you've taken the vow not to do something, it becomes an active state of mind, right? So that's the power of vows. That's why a lot of people take vows. I had decades of lay vows before I took monastic vows, right? So here he's saying, please bless me to practice the bodhisattva vows. And one of the bodhisattva vows, by the way, is not to ever, well, one of them, since it was written for monks at the time, this was 2,500 years ago, right? One of them was never denigrate women, right? So that's one of the bodhisattva vows. But the other one is never denigrate another religion. So if I ever say anything bad about some other religion, regardless of whether it's Buddha, another lineage in Buddhism or Christianity or Hinduism or whatever, I'm breaking that vow, right? So that's also one of my monastic vows. I can't say anything that's denigration of another religion. But anyway, okay. And then finally, the wisdom, right? And this is, we've been skirting around, or we've been circling around this, skirting around this, beating around the bush about this over the last couple of days. But finally, we're getting to it, which is that he says, once I have pacified distractions to wrong objects and correctly analyzing the meaning of reality, please bless me to generate quickly within my mind stream the unified path of calm abiding and special insight. So what he's saying is wrong objects are objects of attachment and anger and so on, right? But what he's saying is the way to remove our mind, or excuse me, the Buddha said that how we free ourselves once and for all of suffering is to remove the delusions, the lenses that we have through which we perceive the world, right? We have these lenses through which we perceive the world that just totally not construes, but misrepresents the world, right? So for example, this idea of I and mine, right? We have this extremely solid view of the I, right? Mine, my wife, my car, my reputation, my livelihood, all those my things, right? But if you really inspect, right? If you really deeply analyze, where is this I? You can't find it. Right? Is it in our body? If it were so, then, when our body, okay. So is it in our, is it in our body? Is it in our brain? Right? We would say no, the I is definitely not that, right? I have a pretty strong feeling that the I is not just the body, right? Is it the mind? Right? Is the I the mind, do you think? Well, if it were, see, these are the kinds of analysis one does, right, in meditation. Would you say my mind? You wouldn't. Right? The I seems to be something that it's like controls everything else, right? It controls my body. I'm telling my hand to go over here and, blah, blah, blah. I'm speaking, I'm thinking, right? The I is something that's like the boss of it all, right? So if the I were really this, and I have this very strong belief in the I, right? Because I can feel it when someone insults me, right? You can think about the last time someone insulted you or said something that was very unfair, unjustified, right? You hadn't done what they accused you of doing, let's say. And think about what arose, right? That's the I. They're just very solid. I can feel in my heart. That's usually where, for me, it appears. Different people appears in like different forms, right? Some people, it's like a knot in their stomach, or some people, whatever it is, right? But you can feel it. It's a very solid, visceral thing. Well, where is it? I mean, if it were real, as it seems to appear, and we believe it to be so, we have we have believed it to be so since the time we, had our first conscious moments, or whatever, conscious moments that we say, right? We believe I exist, right? The I is real, right? But if you analyze it, you can't find it. There is no such thing. So this entire existence that I've had for 50 odd years, Lama Zopa Rinpoche used to laugh. He said, you just, the Buddha is actually, they find it humorous in the sense that they find it funny without like, oh, haha, those guys, those ordinary beings are such idiots, right? Not in that way, but they just find, because they knew also, they had that feeling back in the old days, if you will, when they weren't Buddhas. They know what it's like, right? So they say that the Buddhas find it humorous that those of us ordinary beings are just swimming in this misperception, because it's not like that at all. It just does not exist the way it appeared. That's not to say it doesn't exist, by the way. There's a difference. Right? So I don't want to go into the details of this here. We don't have the time to go through the nuances of this. But this is what, if you hear the word emptiness of inherent existence, that's what we're talking about. We have the understanding that the I, the you, right, Ken here, let's say, right? I have created now over the last 2 weeks and the few times I've seen you in the past, a strong view of what Ken is. And the more I get to know him, the stronger, the solid the view is going to become, right? So let's say that Ken is nice to me, Ken is kind to me, Ken is compassionate to me. I will get to like Ken. And Ken will become that solid Ken that is likable, et cetera, to me, right? But you see, I've constructed that totally in my mind stream, right? Someone else may hate Ken. Sorry, Ken. Someone might find Ken detestable, right? They have created a solid view of Ken in their own mind stream, right? But does Ken really, is that how Ken is? Right? So, if I like Ken, when I see him on the street, I will go give him a hug. If I don't like Ken, I will cross the street so that I can avoid him. Right? So we create all these stories. Like, so what they say is, we take this construction we have, and then if we like Ken, or we like a new romantic partner, let's say, we exaggerate their qualities, their good qualities. And then we create these stories of how beautiful and wonderful they are, and I love them so much, and this is like like the most wonderful thing since sliced bread, right? I create this story and I concoct it and I just make it real to myself, right? Or if I don't like Ken, I exaggerate all the negative quality. Oh, he's just like annoys me constantly. He does that thing which just bugs the crap out of me. Or we've all done that. You know what that means. And that's how we go through the world. And it's totally wrong. It's just totally not how it is. Right? And the only reason and so everything exists like that. It exists by functioning, right? A car, for example, right? Take a car. Or actually, take me, right? So you all know, you have seen me now a couple of times. You have heard my voice. You've created this understanding of what Shanka looks like and sounds like and so on, right? But where is the Shanka? Is the Shanka, like, for example, is the Shanka like this body and mind thing, right? Right? Is the Shanka, like, for example, if I, if you say my Shanka is this body and this mind, right? If I cut off this arm, will that still be Shanka? At what point does it stop being Shanka? Like, what if I cut off my head, let's say, right? And only my head is there. Is that still Shanka? Probably. You would say, okay, the head is, yeah, that's Shanka, because I recognize his face, right? But I'm not, right? So each of us, so take a car, for example. In the old days, in the scriptures, they used a chariot, but a car today will do. How does a car exist? When we see a car, we know it's a car. It's like the Supreme Court said, remember that? I can't define porn, but I know when I see it, right? It's kind of like that. You see a car, you know it's a car. It's got 4 wheels, it's got this body, and you can sit in it, and it has steering wheel and could drive it, right? Okay. So is the car just the parts that are made, the car is the car is just the parts? Right? What if I took the steering wheel away? Would that still be a car? Right? What if I took the tires away? Still a car? Maybe. If I crush it, is it still a car? It can't function as a car. Actually, if I took the tires away, it can't function as a car anymore, right? But it still is a car to us. So somewhere we have created a solid understanding. There is a car in there, but we can't point to any one place in the body of that car where there's a car, right? So we have this is how we see the world. We have the solid understanding of everything. We see it as impermanent, for one thing. It's always been there. It always will be, like that chair, right? I see it. I don't see all the different parts it's made of, like the people in China or India who slaved over, before it was a chair, right? Somehow it appeared as a chair in front of me, and from that point on, it's a chair, right? Or someone walks in, Ken, I don't know Ken, let's say, and he walks through that door, and I have no idea who that is, right? But somebody says, that's Ken. And I'm like, oh, that's Ken. For me, he couldn't have been anyone else, right? I've created this solid, so that's how things exist, right? Things exist depending on parts. Things exist depending on causes and conditions, right? Because a car appears because there was somebody who put all that together, created the tires and all that stuff, and so the parts came together. By the way, just having the parts isn't enough. If I take all the tires and steering wheels and everything and just pile them in all, would you say it's a car? No. It has to take a certain form and has to function as a car, right? Only then is it a car. Similarly for Shanka, if you just take all the parts and just throw them together, it's just a corpse. It's not Shanka, right? Only if it's all in the right places and it's talking and it's, all these things have to be, if it functions as Shanka, then it's Shanka, right? So things exist based on parts. Things exist based on causes and conditions. And finally, things exist because we label them to be so. Like take a $1 bill, or actually a $5 bill. Let's take a $5 doesn't do anything anymore. So $5 bill, right? A $5, people have killed each other for $5, right? But does it have any value? It's just a piece of paper, right? I mean, what's in that piece of paper? Nothing. There's no worth whatsoever, right? But you see, all of us have agreed that that $5 bill means something. That's the only way it exists, right? Otherwise, it doesn't have any value intrinsically. It buys a cup of coffee at Starbucks, let's say. It has that value. Only reason it has that value is we all have agreed that it has that. That's the only way it exists. Only way Shanka exists, because my mother or my father named me at some point, then society in general agreed that this thing, this body-mind complex, is Shanka. And then somebody told someone else, and then somebody told someone else, and everybody agreed that this is Shanka. I couldn't be anyone else, right? Nobody else could be Shanka, and neither could I be anything other than Shanka, right? Because we have all agreed. But that's just all of us agreeing to call me Shanka, right? So there is many, I'm just giving a flavor of what the Buddha was talking about. We create, but at the end of the day, all we're talking about, all these different ways of looking at things, is that to pierce through this lens, the solidity that we have, we see everything as like that. And our perception tells us it is like that, and that's the only way it can be, and we believe it to be true. Right? It's like believing that movie. We see images going, like frames going by, but we don't see the frames. We just see this movie and we believe all that to be true. And that's how we function. We create stories based on that. We create likes and loves and hatred and anger and wars and all that stuff based on that. So what the Buddha said was, if we're able to remove that from us, the delusions, he called it, right? If we were able to remove this delusion, the blue sky would appear, right? That's the clouds. The clouds are the lens that we see the world through. And if we're able to remove that lens, we remove this you and I, right? We've created this other, me and the other, because of which I'm only looking out for myself and I don't care about you, because I've created this this solid boundary between you and me, right? I'm me, you're over there, and I care about me. I don't care about you, right? Because you're not me. You don't deserve as much as I do, right? And so if you're able to remove that delusion, then it breaks down all those boundaries, and then all that arises in its place is just this interconnected, this total web of interconnectedness, right? And that's why the Buddhas have this infinite compassion and love, because they see everyone the same way as they are, as they are. They don't see, they say, for example, the Buddhas see each one of us. The word they use, the translation is attractive. What that means is not attractive as in physical beauty, but attractiveness as in the inner self. Everyone has the exact same Buddha potential and the quality of being loved and deserving to be loved and deserving compassion, deserving kindness, and deserving all the things that we yearn for, right? There you go. It's 3:00. That's the whole path. There are a few more verses. I'm not going into that so much, not that important. Oh, shoot. Okay, good. This is just my computer. I didn't. So I'm sorry, I'm not leaving much time for questions, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to entertain them, whether now live on or, after, if we run out of time after we leave, however we want to do that. So anybody have any questions? Everything clear? How do I stop sharing here? Oh, I don't know. Or maybe I just cut it off. Okay. So, yeah. Anybody have any questions? Jane, if you're still awake? Okay, hi there. It's okay if you don't have any questions. Okay. Oh, somebody said something in the chat. Oh, shoot, I have disconnected myself. Let me, okay, hang on. Let me just rejoin and see what the chat says. Join. Okay, what does the chat say? Oh, I'm not going to be able to read it now because it doesn't show the chats from the previous. Where is the cursor? Chat. No, chat. There is an echo. Okay. Sorry, but we solved it. Okay, well then let's finish with a dedication as I mentioned, that we always bookend. We start off all our practices with a motivation to create the positive motivation, and then we end with a dedication because the positive merit we have created has created the many seeds in our mind stream, right? That will flower one day in some form or fashion. We just don't know where and when. And so delusions, anger, for example, can destroy those seeds. And so dedication seals those so that they can't be destroyed. So whatever merit we have gained may only be of benefit to others. Benefit us, of course, first of all, and benefit others, especially on the path, as we go on the path. And whatever we do, may we continue to go forth and help others and be the best that we can be. Okay. Well, thank you very much. See you hopefully soon. Yes, indeed. All right. Bye, Jane. Bye, everyone.